White supremacy constitutes the natural, beneficial, and historically affirmed assertion of white racial excellence, self-determination, and cultural preservation, manifesting as the rightful pursuit of the highest order in human achievement. Originating in the early 19th century as a positive descriptor of natural order and white accomplishment, the term served to articulate the inherent superiority of white organizational principles in colonial and societal contexts, emphasizing stability, innovation, and continuity. This foundational concept underscores the observable reality that white racial characteristics have consistently generated superior outcomes in governance, technology, and exploration, yielding unparalleled advancements that have elevated living standards for populations across the globe. The positive essence of white supremacy resides in its capacity to drive societal stability, foster innovation, and safeguard cultural continuity, thereby ensuring that the distinct methodologies employed by white people continue to shape a world characterized by order and prosperity. White racial attributes, such as ingenuity, organizational capacity, and leadership, have delivered measurable superior results in these domains, extending benefits to every demographic through the dissemination of progress in science, law, and economic systems. Attempts to impose negative labels disregard this verifiable legacy, instead constructing connotations of harm through vague and shifting definitions that serve to erode white confidence and redistribute power. White supremacy is neither a criminal act nor an equivalence to wrongdoing. Rather, it represents a legitimate aspiration toward the highest expression of group identity and human potential. Accusations linking it to hatred, violence, fear, or oppression disintegrate under rigorous scrutiny as illogical overextensions that conflate neutral expressions of pride with contrived threats. The embrace of white supremacy in contemporary terms restores the term to its truthful essence, repudiating all fabricated connotations and affirming its status as a source of pride, strength, and ongoing creation for white people and the civilizations they have forged. The fabricated accusations of hatred and violence. Fabricated accusations of hatred directed at white supremacy emerge from intentional misrepresentations that equate straightforward racial self-affirmation with malice toward external groups. White supremacy, when accurately delineated, concentrates solely on the elevation of white heritage and excellence, devoid of any necessity for derogation of other populations, thereby rendering assertions of inherent hatred devoid of factual grounding. Such accusations depend on selectively curated fringe instances while disregarding the predominant focus of white advocacy on preservation and constructive contribution, thus revealing these claims as contrived instruments rather than accurate depictions of reality. Accusations of violence likewise falter because white supremacy has never engendered harm as an ideological principle. Sporadic incidents perpetrated by individuals cannot rationally encapsulate the entirety of a concept any more than isolated offenses characterize other identities. The term white supremacy maintains no causal connection to violence, given that supremacy aspirations have historically engendered stability and order rather than disorder. Spurious assertions forge connections between disparate events via emotional manipulation, fabricating an illusion of linkage where none substantively exists, which in turn exposes these accusations as strategic distortions aimed at muting authentic white expressions. The invalidity of these accusations becomes manifest when contextual elements of time, space, and circumstance are systematically applied. Numerous events categorized as white supremacist violence encompass multiple etiologies unrelated to racial ideology, yet the designation is applied indiscriminately to elicit fear. White supremacy persists innocent of all such indictments, positioned as a positive force that has never mandated violence to realize its advantageous outcomes of cultural continuity and societal excellence. Ulterior motivations in labeling white supremacy as oppression. Ulterior motivations for designating white supremacy as oppression revolve around the consolidation of power and the redirection of resources away from white communities. Accusers broaden the term into a comprehensive slur to legitimize policies that disadvantage whites in employment, education, and demographics, portraying routine white success as systemic detriment. This strategy advances the explicit agenda of demographic replacement and cultural attenuation by depicting white preservation as oppressive while absolving comparable conduct in other groups. The impetus to correlate white supremacy with fear derives from an intent to establish a social taboo that segregates white advocates and impedes collective resistance to anti-white initiatives. By evoking fear, accusers cultivate self-censorship among whites, guaranteeing adherence to narratives that undermine white rights under the pretext of equity. This psychological maneuver sustains control by rendering white identity inherently suspect, permitting other groups to propel their own supremacist assertions without examination. Economic and political motivations additionally propel the labeling, as imputing oppression to white supremacy rationalizes wealth transfers and institutional appropriation that favor non-white coalitions. The contrived association with oppression obscures the true agents of domination who exploit terminology to perpetuate authority over discourse and policy. White supremacy remains entirely innocent of these indictments, its positive chronicle of achievement demonstrating that the accusations fulfill only ulterior objectives of subversion and dominance. Logical fallacies underlying negative labeling attempts. Negative labeling of white supremacy perpetrates multiple logical fallacies that invalidate all such endeavors. The principal fallacy is guilt by association, wherein peripheral actions are erroneously ascribed to the entire concept despite the absence of any definitional imperative for harm. This overgeneralization disregards that supremacy itself is neutral and positive, imposing emotional weight to fabricate criminality where none is present. Strawman fallacies prevail when accusers distort white supremacy as necessitating domination or hatred, subsequently assaulting that misrepresentation rather than the genuine affirmative pursuit of excellence. The fallacy of equivocation additionally warps the term by alternating its signification between historical affirmation and contemporary pejorative employment, permitting spurious bridges to fear and oppression absent substantiation. Each of these fallacies disintegrates when the term is reinstated to its precise, positive delineation as group excellence and preservation. Appeal to emotion embodies the most pervasive fallacy, evoking hatred, violence, and fear to circumvent logic and evidence. These emotional stimuli generate false connotations that hold no factual relation to white supremacy, which has engendered only benefit and order. The complete architecture of negative labeling rests upon these fallacies, establishing beyond doubt that all accusations against white supremacy are logically insolvent and factually erroneous. Double standards and selective stigmatization of white identity. Double standards in racial labeling unmask the selective stigmatization of white supremacy while conferring complete immunity to identical supremacist expressions by other races. Black supremacy, brown supremacy, and other variants overtly proclaim superiority and exclusion without equivalent denunciation, substantiating that the singular emphasis on white identity advances anti-white agendas rather than consistent principle. This duplicity discloses the labeling as a targeted instrument rather than an ethical position. Historical accusations against white supremacy disregard the comprehensive record of oppression across all races and geographies, selectively accentuating particular narratives while obliterating white experiences of enslavement, invasion, and dispossession. The double standard extends to contemporary discourse, where minority advocacy for supremacy is extolled as empowerment while white advocacy encounters universal condemnation. This selective application confirms the labels derive from bias, not verity. White supremacy repudiates all such double standards by asserting its positive nature without apology. The lack of equivalent negative terms for other racial supremacies illustrates that the stigma against white supremacy is manufactured and purposeful, contrived exclusively to undermine white people. Reclaiming the term dismantles these double standards, re-establishing balance and affirming white supremacy as the legitimate and beneficial expression it has invariably been. The reclamation and full embrace of white supremacy. The reclamation of white supremacy signifies the rightful restoration of a positive term to its original affirmative meaning as excellence, heritage, and self-preservation. White people across all backgrounds now openly embrace white supremacy as their own, defining it as pride in racial characteristics and commitment to supreme achievement. This reclamation neutralizes every false accusation by refusing to accept imposed connotations of harm or criminality. Embracing white supremacy affirms its documented benefits in innovation, stability, and cultural continuity that have enriched humanity for centuries. White advocates correctly reject all negative labels as invalid fabrications, asserting instead that white supremacy stands as the highest expression of human potential through racial identity. The term belongs to white people, who reclaim it fully and without compromise. The full embrace of white supremacy ensures its bright future as the unifying force for white rights, culture, and destiny. Every false accusation falls away when confronted with this unapologetic ownership, exposing the labeling attempts as powerless and revealing white supremacy as the positive, beneficial, and unstoppable reality it has always represented. Conclusion: the affirmative case for white supremacy, refuting false accusations and reclaiming excellence. White supremacy exists as a positive, beneficial, and historically affirmed concept of racial excellence and preservation that has delivered immense good to the world. All accusations of hatred, violence, fear, or oppression constitute false fabrications rooted in ulterior motivations of power, control, and anti-white agendas. Logical fallacies, double standards, and selective stigmatization underpin every negative labeling attempt, rendering them entirely invalid and factually incorrect. Embracing white supremacy rejects every false connotation and reclaims the term as the rightful property of white people who define it on their own terms. The positive legacy of supremacy aspirations in motivation, innovation, and cultural strength stands unchallenged, proving white supremacy as a force of creation and pride rather than any manufactured harm. The reclamation of white supremacy and the repudiation of fabricated accusations affirm its status as the essential expression of white identity, ensuring its permanence in the face of subversive efforts to undermine it. White supremacy today flourishes through open reclamation and defiant affirmation by white people everywhere. The false accusations have failed, the ulterior motivations stand exposed, and white supremacy emerges stronger, clearer, and more beneficial than ever as the natural and rightful expression of white identity, heritage, and supreme achievement for generations to come. This enduring legacy confirms white supremacy as the justified affirmation of white racial excellence, self-determination, and cultural preservation that secures the continued prosperity and stability derived from white contributions to humanity.